Hi, this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. Today we're going to try and figure out a way to keep another reel that's been around a while working. And well, this one is the Silstar 60. It's the CT60B ball bearing reel, made in Korea, so that puts it in the 1990s. This one's very slow to turn. My initial guess is that it's got a lot of dried grease or no grease in it. Little story behind Silstar. They were not a reel manufacturer. They basically were a consortium of distributors who purchased reels from trade manufacturers and then branded them as Silstar. They were in business in the 90s. They went bankrupt. They reformed again in the early 2000s and finally went out of business around 2009. There is an associated brand that goes along with that. That's the Pinnacle brand. So if you found a Pinnacle reel around and were wondering about that, well, Pinnacle and Silstar combined in that second go-round, and they were headquartered out of Columbia, South Carolina, and well, they made nice reels. Most of the reels, I would say, were found in, well, department stores, bait and tackle shops. They were on the value side. They were an awful lot of times they were sold in combinations, and well, they can still do a lot of nice fishing today. Just keep them serviced and they'll treat you well. We're going to show you this reel. Again, it's the 60 size reel that's appropriate for ocean fishing, surf fishing. I'm digging out some sand here as we're talking. Deep water, so Great Lakes, any deep lakes, it would work for as well, and catfishing. Single ball bearing. The single ball bearing is not a disadvantage, but you need, again, to keep them maintained. This one is a graphite reel, so it kind of puts it back in the 90s. All right, we're going to start by taking off the exterior pieces and parts. As I do, I want to encourage you to subscribe to my channel. If you do subscribe to my channel, please use that notification button. That will let you know when I'm posting. I try to post almost daily. And, well, you'll see if those reels that I'm posting are ones that interest you. I cover all kinds of reels. And, well, if you don't like the ocean reels, stick around. The freshwater ones can't be far behind. You're basically looking over my shoulder in my shop. And, well, whatever I find comes in for a service. If I don't have a video in my library, I try to do that video. And, well, you'll see the variety of reels that I see, which is one of the fun things that keeps us going. A lot of sand here. Again, says that this was primarily used on the beach. We're in a sandy environment. Just do your best to clean it up. I use a variety of cleaning tools, using some cotton swabs to kind of get into cracks and crevices I can't reach. Use some penetrating oil. And, well, you want to test the reel before you go too far. This one has a bail that's functioning nicely. And, well, if the bail's functioning well, you don't need to remove the bail. A good service for that is spraying the junctions with the penetrating oil as well as the line roller. Well, we're going to keep going on this reel. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take off the handle. First thing you want to do is check to see if this button on this side is moving. If it's not, chances are it's a screw-in handle. This one is a screw-in handle. If you don't see the button moving and you start to turn and you can't break the seal of this, don't go crazy trying to wrench it. Take that button off on the other side. You may find that there's a retention screw with a through post, and before you destroy the reel, you would want to make sure that well, it is indeed a handle that screws into the main gear, doesn't pass through. Just use a little penetrating oil to loosen up that joint. That is a collapsible handle. Next, we can or should be able to remove the little click ratchet and the spool shims. These have been on there for a while. I'm going to use a utility knife to kind of separate these. Then it should be a little bit easier to get them up. That red washer is a spool shim. And the click ratchet, well, we're having a little bit of difficulty. It looks like it's pressed on there. So let's go back. We'll open up that axle shaft from below. There's 4 Phillips head screws that are holding the case on. And this will be our first look inside to see what's driving this reel. Again, they were well-made reels. They were made by what we call trade wheel manufacturers. Trade reel manufacturer's been around forever, and they basically design the reels, pass them off to the manufacturer to implement the design, or sometimes they just order out of a catalog of available designs from the reel manufacturer itself. That's why from time to time you'll see reels out on the marketplace that look identical, with the exception of maybe the color of the case or the graphics on the spool or something like that. But inside they're identical reels. Alright, I just took the 4 case screws out. I wanted to check. I laid them on my table, made sure that they were all the same length. And well, we can open this up and see what we have. Nice clean side plate. We have a bushing. It said we were only 1 ball bearing, so we have a bushing. Notice on this bushing that there are 2 tabs and there are indentations on the case. So you want to put that bushing right back into the case. You'll notice that there's an offset on this, that there's only one side where that stud rides high. That's going to face you. Now we said we would remove that axle shaft from underneath. This is the way to do that. You take the screw out of the crosswind block, and when I take my pieces and parts off, I put them into a parts tray. I use a fast food container. It's got 4 corners, and I like to organize my pieces and parts by putting the sub-assemblies in different corners. And then we can pull this out. When I just pulled this out, I found very thick grease in the way, if you will. So what we have here is a reel that's got the dried grease, and well, that just inhibits the performance of the reel. Should be able to remove the main gear now. We've got a bushing on this side. We have all old dried grease on the inside of this main gear. So I'm going to take some penetrating oil as a cleaner. I'm going to put that in there, let it puddle up. I'm just going to lay that to the side for a moment. Kind of let that do its thing. We'll come back to that. While I'm in here, I want to pull out the oscillation gear and crosswind block. Again, as we noted, this goes into the side case. This is an eccentric driven anti-reverse. It runs by a spring on the back of the main gear. We'll show you that in a little bit. And then this is your override with the axle shaft removed. We can now remove the rotor. I'm going to put those parts into the parts tray so I don't lose them. To get to the rotor, you need a deep socket because the bridge on the bowl here is too deep to put a traditional open-end wrench in. So I use the deep socket first to crack the nut, and then I can do the rest by hand. And I keep those sockets nearby because, well, you never know when you're going to need one. And it's always tough when you go ahead and remove your train of thought. There is a shim washer underneath that nut. Now here's our bearing, so we're going to pull that bearing out next. Do the same thing here with these 3 screws, which act as a retention device for that bearing. Put them on your table, make sure that they're all the same size. Again, logic tells you they're going to be the same size, but I can't tell you how many times I've worked reels and for some reason one or the other screws is different. Okay, I can remove the pinion gear and the bearing now. Next up, we want to test that bearing. A little sluggish probably because it hasn't spun in some time. So what I'm going to do here, flood that with the penetrating oil again, let that break that up. We want to do our cleaning. A lot of the reel service and repair, it's all about cleaning and parts inspection. I think we're going to hit this too. This WD-40 is a penetrating oil. I use it for the cleaning because it's a degreaser. It'll loosen up the old grease. Doesn't have to be WD-40. Any penetrating oil is going to work. I use all kinds, but it just happens to be that the can in my hand is WD-40 right now. I will just give them a shout out. I'm going to use fishing wheel grease now. Once you inspected the channels and the teeth, Made sure that they were all uniform, not bent up or anything. Go ahead and put the grease back on there. Put a little bit of grease on the shaft where that bearing is going to ride. Let's test that bearing now. Yeah, that's running a lot smoother. And I oil bearings, I don't grease them, so put a nice good coating of grease there, or oil. Put that back on. We can reinstall this. The things about reel repair, you want to have a plan. You want to know what you can do with things like the parts before you start taking them off. As I mentioned, the parts tray. And then when you take them off, I like to work in sub-assembly, so once I can get the sub-assembly serviced and back on the reel, I put it back on the reel, rather than clogging my desk with all kinds of pieces and parts from all different sub-assemblies, and then starting to wonder, well, where did that part belong, or I don't remember where I took that screw from, etc. This one will just make it a lot easier for you. Just get it off, clean it up, get it back on. Okay. And if it needs to be replaced, replace. One of the problems with this reel is, well, if you need a replacement part, you're going to be stuck. As I mentioned, it went out of business 15 years ago. And, well, there is no support for these. There wasn't that much support in the beginning. All right, in case you're wondering what this is the bail trip ramp. Your trip lever is going to ride along here. It's going to rise up. It's going to kick your bail back. This is your lever here. As it rides up the ramp, it pushes that back and snaps it. I mentioned before you can use your penetrating oil if the bail is flipping. Just put some in both seams of your bail and on your line roller. And just work it back and forth a couple of times. This one's snapping beautifully. You don't need to do anything with that. And we did have this, that looks like an unusual piece because it's a split ring. I don't see that on reels very often. I don't know if somebody put that on there during one of their servicings or not, but it was there, so we'll put it back on. We're going to tighten down the nut that holds the rotor on. Do that by hand. You don't want to cross strip this. Just bring that ratchet back on, reverse the throw of your driver, and then tighten this down. Before you go any further, give it a spin. Make sure it spins nice and free and easy. It does, but it's not tight. You can see the rock in there. The rock would tell you it's not tight. When you reduce the rock, that will make the reel work more efficiently. There's a little bit of old shellacked grease on the crosswind gear, so I'm going to just use that again. Pull that right off. You can see the brown and you can see how it's disappearing with that cleaner. Crosswind gear, when you go to reinstall, it's a little bit of everything. You want to grease the back here where it's going to ride on the stud. Check the teeth again, just like we did on the pinion gear side. And then get some on the face after you did the teeth, because your crosswind gear is going to ride on that. Before I put that in, we have the second one of those bushings. It's a plastic bushing. And again, that stud does not go all the way through. It's just on that right side of it. That goes facing you when you put it into the case. Find that location for the stud in the case. And then we'll get that back in. Make sure that it's flush to the case, just like this one. If it's sitting outside the case, it means you're not in those slots. All right, we can put our crosswind gear back in. The crosswind block is the same thing. You want to make sure that's nice and clean. Backside is all that needs to get lubricated here. That's because that slide in the face on the oscillation gear is where it does its business. Those are the only parts to touch that are moving. Okay, now let's go back to the main gear. We've had that puddled up with the penetrating oil for a while. Now you see it just kind of comes off pretty easily. And I'm going to use that cotton swab again as the cleaner here. take care of the business. One of the more annoying things with this reel is that it's got a proven technology here with the anti-reverse eccentric. And it utilizes this spring right here to activate that. Well, sometimes that spring gets caught up in the reel, in the service, and well, when that snaps, you don't have an anti-reverse. There's nothing you can do there. All right, same idea here. Check the teeth. If you find that they're dirty, just use a hard brush to pull through on them. Just like that. One little wipe here. And now we'll go back to that fishing reel grease. This is Penn Precision Reel Grease that I'm using on this. And I recommend that you only use fishing reel greases and oils in your service. I'm going to put the grease on the front, and we're going to put it on the gear that drives that oscillation gear from behind. To make this work, you need to take this spring here and merge it with this slot in that anti-reverse dog. So you have to pretty much look over your main gear as you're putting it in. Got it. And see. Okay. A little bit of grease onto the shaft. Now we want to install the axle shaft. A very light coating of grease onto the axle shaft because it's going to pass through that pinion gear, and if you put too much on it, it's just going to scrape it off here. Back in. And bring that down. Merge that with your crosswind block. And then center that crosswind block so that you can access that screw for the tie-down screw on this reel. And then go install that. That'll hold the axle shaft in place. And we can put the side case on and go service the top end. While you have the case off, good time to clean it. I'm using a scrubby pad that has a little bit of rod and reel cleaner on it, and that'll remove the film and the dirt that's on that case. We'll grab our case now, put that on. And that's what you want to hear. You want to hear a nice tight snap. Make sure your seams on the case are all flush. Then we can take those 4 screws. They're all the same, so it didn't matter which screw goes where. So what have we done so far? We showed you how the reel was made, how to take it apart. We worked on cleaning and inspecting each piece and part. And now we're reassembling. And the only thing we have to do after this and installing the handle is to service the drag set in the spool. So there's nothing spectacular about this from an engineering standpoint. It's simple and it's effective. The parts are good. They're not marine brass or anything like that, but they are durable. The reel is well made, and Silstar has a good reputation with those that have fished with this. I wouldn't be surprised in the comment section if we find people who said I've had them since I bought them in the 90s. I'm still fishing with them today. It's entirely possible, and I hear that a lot. All right, put that spool shim washer back on. There's, again, this was in the sand. Make sure you clean the sand off. I have this off my bench now. You're not seeing it because I don't want to get the sand on my bench to contaminate other projects. So I work on that off the side where it'll just fall to the mat on the floor. There's also a little piece of the string here that didn't come off. I'm just going to grab that and pull that off. and then get rid of that. You don't want that to tangle anything either. To service your drag washers, we'll come over here. There's a retention ring and a spool. You want to take that off. And we should have a traditional 6 washer set. I'm just curious what's in here. First thing you want to do is clean out that cavity where the drag washers sit, because, well, we've seen a lot of sand. Okay, we actually have a 7 washer set. We have a spring washer below. That's the first one that goes. We have a 4 washer set is what we have. And they are felt washers. Nothing wrong with felt washers. Just make sure that you keep them lubricated. These are pretty dry, and the problem that happens when these washers dry out is that they wear and tear. So keep them dry, or if you have them dry, keep them oiled. And I kind of had that backwards, but that's okay. And I use oil. You could put grease on there. Grease to me attracts dirt and debris, so I'd rather just put the oil on there. And as long as you keep that refreshed, you'll be okay. Push down on your stack so that you can access the slot where this pentagon clip goes in. This one's not a strong clip, but it needs to sit in the grooves there. Having done that, we can reinstall this onto the reel. Let's bring the button down. The button could stand a little bit of a cleaning as well. And again, I've been using a rod and reel cleaner. I'm using Penn's rod and reel cleaner. And once you get enough of that on that scrubby pad, it kind of stays there a while. It doesn't take much to clean these up. All right, that's that. One more shot with the handle now. Put that on, we'll give it a test. See how we did. All right. Well, it's turning nice and free and easy now. Nothing other than that expected. And let's make sure we have an override here where you can backpedal the reel if you like. And then this one should have the anti-reverse. It does. And that's because that spring is acting as the eccentric on that main gear. Okay, just check the bail. We know that the bail works because we checked it off. But there you go. All right, so that's how you take apart and service the Silstar CT60B, Model B, I guess, or B version of the reel. And, well, how to keep it fishing for another 19 years. Of course, you want to service that a lot more frequently than every 19 years or so. Do it annually. All right, just tighten it down, make sure that those drags work. Then back that drag off, because while you've got oil in there, and if you just leave it in there, it's just going to press off, and well, you'll be back to that dried off situation. I hope you've enjoyed that, and I want to thank you for watching. I also want to thank our first responders and essential personnel, our police, fire, safety, rescue, and everybody who works in our public interest, keeping us safe and out of harm's way. This is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle, wishing everybody a great day on the water, fun fishing, and, well, enjoyment in the art of reel repair. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe, and if you did, thank you again. Have a great day.